It was a bright but chilly morning at St. Alden's Medical Center, and the air inside the lobby buzzed with the usual hum of activity. Doctors hustled between departments, nurses wheeled carts down the hall, and patients sat waiting, their eyes scanning the room with a mix of hope and anxiety. The double glass doors swung open with a loud creak, and in walked a thin teenage boy wearing a worn hoodie and carrying a small backpack slung over one shoulder. His name was Marcus, and from the looks of him, his torn sneakers, unkempt hair, and wary eyes, it was clear he had been living on the streets for some time. Almost immediately, Dr. Langford, the hospital's senior orthopedic surgeon, spotted him from behind the reception desk. His face hardened. "Security," he barked, striding forward. "Remove him. This is a hospital, not a shelter." Marcus didn't flinch. His gaze was fixed on a young girl sitting in a wheelchair near the waiting area. She had shoulder-length brown hair, pale skin, and a distant look in her eyes. Her name was Clara Whitmore, and she hadn't walked a single step in over 3 years. "Wait," Marcus called out, stepping forward even as 2 security guards approached. "I can help her." Dr. Langford scoffed. You're a vagrant, and that little girl has been through the best treatment modern medicine can offer. You think you can just waltz in here and do what licensed doctors couldn't?" Marcus's voice was calm, but firm. "Your treatments didn't work because you've been treating the wrong thing." The guards exchanged a glance, unsure whether to grab him or hear him out. Clara's mother, Mrs. Whitmore, rose from her chair and stepped protectively in front of her daughter. "Who are you?" she demanded. "My name's Marcus. My grandmother, she knew things. She used to work with kids like Clara, kids the doctors had given up on, and she helped them walk." Dr. Langford snorted. "I've heard enough. Remove him." But before the guards could lay a hand on Marcus, a soft voice came from the wheelchair. "Friend." The entire room froze. Clara had not spoken a clear word in over 2 years. Mrs. Whitmore's hand flew to her mouth. "Clara, sweetheart, what did you say?" "Friend," Clara repeated, looking straight at Marcus. Even Dr. Langford looked unsettled, though his pride kept him from showing it. "Coincidence," he muttered. "Let's not make this into something it's not." Marcus met the surgeon's eyes. "I know exactly why Clara never got better. And I know you know, too." His words carried a quiet weight that made Dr. Langford's jaw tighten. That was the last anyone saw of Marcus for 3 days. But when he returned, he didn't step inside. He stood outside the hospital window, looking in at Clara as she played with a stuffed animal on her lap. For reasons no one could explain, Clara's eyes lit up the moment she saw him. Mrs. Whitmore noticed, and the next time Marcus came by, she met him at the entrance before Dr. Langford could interfere. "You said your grandmother helped children like Clara. Who was she?" "Her name was Evelyn Ward," Marcus said softly. "She used to be a nurse here. People called her a miracle worker because she didn't just follow the charts, she listened. She watched. She figured out what the body was trying to say. She helped kids walk when the specialists said they never would." Mrs. Whitmore's eyes widened. She remembered hearing Evelyn's name once or twice from older staff members. "Why are you here, Marcus?" "Because I think Clara's been misdiagnosed," he said. "I think the problem isn't what Dr. Langford says it is." When she asked him what he meant, Marcus explained that he had spent years watching his grandmother work. He had learned her techniques, not as a doctor, but as someone who understood the human body from a different angle. Clara's movements, the way her muscles respond, her posture, it doesn't match the condition they've labeled her with. If I'm right, she could walk again, but someone has to be willing to try. That evening, Marcus finally got a chance to speak with another doctor, Kim, a younger neurologist who had only recently joined the hospital. Unlike Dr. Langford, Dr. Kim didn't dismiss Marcus outright. She listened as he described Clara's symptoms, her history, and the subtle things he had noticed about her reflexes. "Neuromotor disconnection," Marcus said, pulling a small, battered notebook from his backpack. "It's rare, and it gets mistaken for more severe disorders. But if you reconnect the pathways through targeted exercises, patients can regain mobility." Dr. Kim was skeptical, but she couldn't deny Marcus had done his homework. The notebook was filled with sketches of muscle groups, handwritten notes about movement responses, and records of Clara's behavior since he'd first seen her. It wasn't the work of a casual observer, it was the careful documentation of someone who cared deeply. The next day, Dr. Kim requested Clara's medical files. She noticed something troubling. Early test results that didn't quite fit the official diagnosis had been quietly set aside. It was as if someone had wanted the original diagnosis to stick. No matter what, when she confronted Dr. Langford, he brushed it off as irrelevant anomalies. But something in his evasive tone made her dig deeper. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to visit Clara from outside the window. And each time, she seemed more responsive, her gaze more focused, her smiles more frequent. Mrs. Whitmore couldn't ignore the change. Finally, Dr. Kim arranged for Marcus to meet with her privately in one of the smaller rehabilitation rooms. "If you're serious about helping Clara," she told him, "show me exactly what you'd do." Marcus set his backpack on the table and pulled out a set of simple items: elastic bands, a small ball, and a short length of rope. "These aren't magic," he said, "but if I'm right, they'll help wake up the parts of her brain that have been dormant. It's about reteaching her body what it already knows how to do." Dr. Kim watched as Marcus demonstrated each exercise on himself, explaining how it targeted specific connections between the brain and muscles. His explanations were clear, confident, and precise, nothing like the guesswork of a con artist. By the end of the session, Dr. Kim was convinced enough to give him a chance. "We'll try it," she said, "but I'll be there the whole time, monitoring everything." Marcus nodded. "That's all I ask." What none of them knew yet was that this decision would not only change Clara's life forever, it would also uncover a truth that could destroy Dr. Langford's career. The first session with Clara was set for the following morning in a quiet rehabilitation room at the far end of the hospital's west wing. Mrs. Whitmore wheeled her daughter in, her eyes flitting nervously between Marcus and Dr. Kim. Dr. Langford had not been told, yet. Clara sat silently, hugging her stuffed rabbit. Marcus crouched so he was at eye level with her. "Hey, Clara," he said softly. "I'm Marcus. Remember me?" Her lips twitched into a tiny smile, and she gave the faintest nod. "Today, we're going to play a game," he continued, pulling the small ball from his backpack. "This ball's magic. If you hold it just right, it makes your legs remember things they forgot." Dr. Kim's arms were folded, her tablet in hand to record every detail. Mrs. Whitmore knelt beside her daughter, stroking her hair for reassurance. Marcus started with gentle stretches, explaining each step so Clara wouldn't be startled. "We're going to wake up your legs, okay? Just like waking up after a nap." At first, Clara's movements were stiff and hesitant. Her muscles trembled under the slightest resistance. But when Marcus introduced the rope exercise, having her push against the resistance as he gently pulled, something subtle shifted. Her toes curled, her ankle flexed. Dr. Kim's brows knitted together. "That's a positive response," she murmured. "That shouldn't happen with her current diagnosis." Over the next half hour, Marcus guided Clara through a sequence of small but deliberate actions, pressing her foot against the ball, reaching down to touch her knees, shifting her weight slightly forward in the chair. It wasn't much, but Mrs. Whitmore's eyes filled with tears at every small victory. When the session ended, Marcus didn't look triumphant, he looked thoughtful. "She's stronger than I thought." "Which means," he glanced at Dr. Kim, "the diagnosis was definitely wrong." Dr. Kim nodded, already forming a plan. "We need updated scans and nerve conduction tests. If I can prove the misdiagnosis, I can push for an official review." But there was a problem. Those early test results, the ones that didn't fit, were buried deep in hospital records. And Dr. Langford controlled those records. Later that afternoon, Dr. Kim tried to retrieve the files, only to find them locked behind administrative access codes. That wasn't standard procedure for a patient's history. Meanwhile, word began to spread quietly among the staff about the street kid working with Clara. Some whispered that Marcus had no business being there. Others, especially the younger nurses, were intrigued. "If the girl's responding," one of them said, "who cares where he came from?" 2 days later, during Clara's second session, Dr. Langford unexpectedly walked in. His expression was cold, but there was something sharper beneath it: fear. "What exactly is going on here?" he demanded. Dr. Kim straightened. "I'm conducting supplementary rehabilitation tests on Clara. With this unqualified drifter? Langford snapped, pointing at Marcus. You're risking this hospital's liability. Marcus stood, meeting Langford's glare. You mean I'm risking your reputation? A tense silence fell over the room. Mrs. Whitmore's voice cut through it. Dr. Langford, I've seen more improvement in 2 days than in the past 3 years. If Marcus can help my daughter, then I'll take that risk. Langford's eyes narrowed, but he forced a smile. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore, my only concern is Clara's well-being, but I strongly advise against unverified methods. After he left, Marcus turned to Dr. Kim. He knows, he said quietly, and now he's going to make it harder for us. That night, Dr. Kim stayed late, digging through backup server logs. Around midnight, she found something alarming. Clara's early test results had been manually altered in the hospital system. The original scans showed signs of treatable neuromotor disconnection, not the degenerative condition Langford had claimed. Why would a surgeon falsify a diagnosis? Dr. Kim's stomach sank as the possibilities ran through her mind: research funding, insurance claims, prestige for managing an incurable case. None of them were good. The next morning, Dr. Kim confronted Marcus with the findings. He didn't just make a mistake, she said, he deliberately made it look hopeless. Marcus clenched his jaw. Then we don't just have to help Clara, we have to expose him. The plan came together quickly. Continue Clara's exercises, gather undeniable evidence of her progress, and then force the hospital board to see the truth. Over the next week, Marcus pushed Clara gently but steadily. She could now lift her legs an inch off the footrests of her wheelchair. She laughed more. She looked forward to the sessions. But with every small victory, Marcus could feel Langford's eyes on him. The surgeon began appearing in hallways, lingering at doorways, even speaking to Mrs. Whitmore in hushed tones. One evening, Marcus returned to the hospital only to find the rehab room locked. The next day, Clara's chart had a note stating that all unauthorized therapy was to be discontinued. Mrs. Whitmore was furious. He can't do this, she said. I'm her mother. I decide what's best for her. Marcus glanced at Dr. Kim. We're running out of time. She nodded grimly. Then we'll have to make the board see Clara with their own eyes. What none of them realized was that Langford already had a counterplan, and it involved making sure Marcus would never set foot in St. Albans again. 2 days after the therapy ban, Marcus arrived at the hospital to find 2 uniformed security guards waiting at the entrance. One of them stepped forward. Marcus Hale? That's me, Marcus replied cautiously. You're no longer permitted on hospital grounds. The guard said flatly. Orders from administration. Dr. Kim appeared at the sliding doors just in time to hear it. This is absurd, she shouted. You can't bar him without cause. Ma'am, we have our instructions. The guard interrupted. Marcus gave a small nod to Dr. Kim, his eyes calm but burning with resolve. It's okay, for now. He stepped back from the entrance. But before leaving, he caught Dr. Kim's gaze and mouthed, "Don't stop." Inside the hospital, Dr. Langford was already congratulating himself. With Marcus gone, the last obstacle to his control over Clara's case was removed. He didn't know Dr. Kim had no intention of playing by his rules. That evening, Dr. Kim visited Marcus at a small diner near the old bus station. He was sitting in a corner booth, sketching diagrams in a worn notebook. We don't have much time, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. The board meets in a week. If we don't have undeniable proof by then, Clara's progress will be erased from the record. Marcus tapped his notebook. Then we take the proof to them directly. We film Clara's next session. But the room is locked. And Langford's watching, Dr. Kim pointed out. Marcus smiled faintly. Then we won't use the hospital. 2 mornings later, Mrs. Whitmore drove Clara to a rented community center gym. Marcus was already there, setting up a small camera on a tripod. The space smelled faintly of fresh paint and floor polish. But it was private, and for the first time in days, they could work without interruption. The exercises began slowly. Marcus had Clara push a small weighted sled a few inches across the floor. Her arms shook, but her legs, weak but waking, took some of the load. She laughed breathlessly after each attempt. By the end of the session, Clara was able to stand for 3 full seconds while holding Marcus's hands. Mrs. Whitmore sobbed quietly behind the camera. That night, Marcus and Dr. Kim reviewed the footage. The improvement was unmistakable. "There's no way they can deny this," Dr. Kim said, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and fear. But Marcus wasn't convinced. "Langford will try. We need more than progress. We need proof he falsified her diagnosis." Dr. Kim hesitated. "I think I know how to get it. But it's going to break a lot of rules." Her plan was simple but risky. Access the hospital's restricted archive room after hours and retrieve Clarice's original test results. The room was secured by a keycard and monitored by a single camera. On Thursday night, Dr. Kim swiped into the archive under the pretense of checking surgical reports. Once inside, she quickly navigated to the neurology section, her heart pounding. There it was. Clara Whitmore. Patient file 23794. The original scans were still stored on an old external drive, disconnected from the main network. She copied them onto a secure flash drive, double-checking that she left no trace. But as she was leaving, she heard a voice behind her. "Working late, Dr. Kim?" She froze. Dr. Langford was standing in the doorway, his eyes sharp. "Just following up on some paperwork," she said, forcing her voice to stay even. His gaze flicked to her coat pocket, where the outline of the flash drive was barely visible. For a moment, she thought he might reach for it, but instead, he stepped aside. "Don't work too hard," he said with a thin smile. Dr. Kim didn't breathe until she was halfway down the hall. The next day, she met Marcus and Mrs. Whitmore in a quiet cafe. They plugged the drive into Marcus's battered laptop. The scans were clear. Clara's spinal cord and brain structure were intact, with only minor neuromotor signal disruption, nothing that warranted a degenerative diagnosis. Marcus closed the laptop. "This is it. Between the footage and these scans, we've got him." But just as they began planning their presentation to the board, Mrs. Whitmore's phone buzzed, her face drained of color. "It's Clara," she said, her voice shaking. "She's been moved to the ICU. Langford says she had a sudden collapse." Marcus's stomach turned cold. He knew Langford well enough now to suspect that this wasn't a medical emergency. It was a move to lock Clara away from them. He looked at Dr. Kim. "If he keeps her there until the board meeting, she won't be able to show them what she can do. We have 6 days to get her out." Dr. Kim's reply was grim. "Then we'd better start planning a rescue, before Langford writes her future in permanent ink." Marcus didn't waste a second. "If Langford thinks isolating Clara will make us back down, he's got another thing coming," he told Dr. Kim as they sat in the dim back room of the cafe. The ICU at Westbrook Medical was tightly controlled, no visitors without clearance. Strict visiting hours, and security stationed in the hall. Langford would have made sure Clara's chart was locked behind layers of confidential notes. Mrs. Whitmore's hands trembled as she gripped her coffee mug. "I'm her mother. I should be able to see her." "You will," Marcus promised. "We just have to be smart." The plan was dangerous but straightforward. Dr. Kim still had her keycard access. During her scheduled night rounds, she'd bring Marcus in as a consulting therapist under an emergency clearance note. Once inside, they would document Clara's current condition and get a short video of her attempting to stand. That would be enough to prove she was stable and strong, contradicting Langford's narrative. 3 nights later, it was time. The hospital corridors were quiet, the overhead lights casting a sterile glow over the polished floors. Dr. Kim led Marcus through a side elevator and into the ICU wing. Outside Clara's room, a guard glanced at Marcus's badge, a quick printout with "Temp Access" stamped across the front. "Consulting therapist," Dr. Kim said briskly. The guard hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, Clara's face lit up the moment she saw Marcus. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I did," he replied gently. "You ready to show the world what you can do?" He adjusted her bed, helped her swing her legs over the side, and steadied her as she stood. Her knees wobbled, but she held herself upright for 5 full seconds. Mrs. Whitmore, who had slipped in moments earlier, captured every second on her phone. Suddenly, the door burst open. Langford stormed in, his voice sharp and cold. "What the hell is going on here?" Marcus didn't flinch, just watching a patient stand on her own for the first time in years. You want to explain to the board why you said she never would? Langford's eyes darted to Mrs. Whitmore's phone. That footage is unauthorized. Delete it. No, Mrs. Whitmore said firmly, her voice shaking but resolute. This is my daughter, and I will show it to whoever I damn well please. The next morning, Marcus, Dr. Kim, and Mrs. Whitmore walked into the board meeting. Langford was already there, smug and confident, until the video played. The room fell silent as Clara stood tall on the screen, her mother's muffled sobs audible in the background. Then Dr. Kim stepped forward with the scans from the archive. These are Clara Whitmore's original results. They prove her diagnosis was exaggerated to justify treatments that never addressed her actual condition. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Langford's face paled. When pressed for an explanation, he stammered through excuses about interpretation errors and differing medical opinions. But the evidence was overwhelming. By the end of the session, the board had voted unanimously to remove Langford from his position and launch a full review of his past cases. Clara's treatment was officially reassigned to Dr. Kim and Marcus. Over the next months, the progress was remarkable. Clara not only walked, she danced, she ran, and she learned to ride a bike for the first time. Mrs. Whitmore attended every session, her joy growing with each milestone. The hospital, in an attempt to repair its damaged reputation, announced the creation of the Whitmore Rehabilitation Program, a dedicated center for pediatric neuromotor recovery. Marcus was offered the lead role, but he declined the title. "Just let me do the work," he said, one sunny afternoon, as the center's glass doors swung open for the grand opening. Clara walked in without assistance, her steps steady and proud. A new plaque hung on the wall near the entrance. Every child deserves someone who refuses to give up. Marcus stood quietly in the background, watching Clara laugh with Dr. Kim. For the first time in years, his heart felt light. He had kept his promise, not just to Clara, but to every child like her. And somewhere, in the corner of his mind, he could hear his grandmother's voice. Miracles happen when you see the person, not just the patient. The fight was over, but the work, his real work, was only beginning. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to Tell Night. At Tell Night, stories remind us that healing begins with hope, and even the gentlest kindness can rewrite a destiny. Don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss a story that could brighten your day or transform your perspective. Until our next story, keep your heart open and your spirit brave.